Hey, Rising, welcome to another round of Grows. Hope you guys are off to a great start, having a good conversation this week as we continue in our series, kind of this Beyond Acts, After Acts, as we look at missions and kind of the church and its responsibility and kind of taking the gospel message from Jerusalem to the ends of the earth. Today, we have the opportunity to hear from one of our mission partners here at Rising, who actually just shared a couple weeks ago on Sunday morning. But in case you forgot his name, this is Jeff Shaw, Freedom Collective, formerly Out of Darkness. And so we have the honor to get to kind of hear kind of a little bit more. I know on Sunday mornings we only get like 7-8 minutes, so it's kind of very brief and just here's a real quick catch up. But we kind of want to have some time just to get to know you and kind of hear your story and kind of talk about really today. I feel like God's calling into ministry and what that looks like, and kind of the story of how God uses some of our background sometimes to prepare us for what he has ahead of us. And so I don't know if you just want to introduce yourself. Sure. And tell us just quickly a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So again, my name is Jeff. I live pretty close by to you guys over on the other side of Lawrenceville, married to my sweetheart, Haley, and we have 3 kids, 7, 5, and 2. And as Pastor mentioned, I have the awesome joy of helping to lead the Freedom Collective ministry, which serves victims of trafficking and exploitation.
So let's talk about how you got started, because you kind of got started around the same time Rising got started. So we've been kind of like tracking with you for quite a long time now, 12 years, I think. And so I think you mentioned earlier that 2011, well, you received, talk about that.
Sure. So I probably, as many of us did, grew up in a believing home, going to church, actually went to Christian school, K through 12, and I was the oldest kid. So I definitely learned what's expected of me and kind of how to live outwardly my Christian faith, made a profession at age 6. But when I was 13, I got secretly into pornography, and that became a very addictive and powerful force in my life. And through my teen years, what I discovered was, even though I still believed in God, I knew I wasn't growing in him, growing in holiness when I was entertaining this secret sin daily at the same time. And so by the time I got to college, I had really become the prodigal. I was doing all the things I said I would never do as a matter of principle. I stopped going to church. I stopped trying to maintain this outer appearance of godliness and just gave myself over to the desires of my flesh and of the world. And God, in his kindness, never stopped pursuing me. And when I was 26, I was working as a lawyer, and the 2 guys that I was working for were both believers. And I thought they were mentoring me as a young professional. They were discipling me. And I remember one day I was driving home. This was 2009. It was a mile commute, so not a long, thoughtful drive. I was sitting at the last red light before my street, and the presence of God just encountered me. I still get goosebumps when I talk about it. It's so hard to describe, but the way it felt was all these things that had been deposited in me by my family, my church, the memorized verses, the Bible stories. The Holy Spirit breathed them to life, and they meant something. And I could see the emptiness of this road that I was on, and that I was just living for every week for the next weekend and for the next party. And all of a sudden there was this fire in my spirit to get back to the things of God and knowing God and being with his people. And so I picked up the phone, I called one of my bosses, and I said, "Can I go to church with you on Sunday?" He'd been inviting me for a couple of years. And that started this new, beautiful walk with the Lord as an adult.
So coming from that, you received Jesus in 2009, or that's kind of when things come back together. And then you start this ministry in 2011, 2 years later. So how did that transition? And what did you feel like God was calling you to this ministry, which obviously was kind of in an area of struggle for you for a long time? So
yeah, that's right. So, and I think that's an important point too. When I came back to the Lord, there were a lot of things that fell away immediately, and things that I didn't care to drink anymore. I didn't want to be at the club. I stopped dating because I wanted to renew my mind and renew my heart. And that one thing though that got its claws in early of pornography continued to be a struggle. But the Lord took me on this journey of confession, accountability. As a 26-year-old, 13 years into it, I'm telling other people for the first time in my life. So having a safe community of men that wanted to encourage me, support me, call me to holiness, and coming through that cycle, I always felt wired for justice, and that was expressing itself in the law. But I felt like the Lord was saying, hey, I have something else I want you to seek out. So the summer of 2010, I tried to start a homelessness ministry at my church, and no one came to any of the interest meetings. And so I got a very clear sense that that door was closed. And then in the fall of 2010, I partnered with a ministry to do inner city work with vulnerable kids in extended stay motels. And I was exposed to prostitution at that time. And the Lord said, okay, you're getting closer, but this isn't it. And then in January 2011, a group of us started reading a book together called Not for Sale. And this story was people all over the world that were in modern day slavery. And then someone, not a huge, big ministry, but one person who saw the injustice and said, okay, this is what I can do in my capacity to impact someone's life. And I remember every night I would read a chapter of that book, set it down, weep over it. And I could sense the Lord saying, you found it. Like I am taking my burden and I'm sharing it with you in this intimate relationship that we're building. I'm sharing something with you that's important to me. And when I finished the book, I remember just crying out to God, I don't know what to do. I don't have an education in anti-trafficking. I don't know where to go. I don't know what the need is, but if you show me what to do, I'll do it. And I remember really clearly the Lord just invited me to walk out on my balcony. It was late at night. I looked out at the city of Atlanta, and he said, everything you just read about overseas is happening here. And it was as though my heart could hear the cries of women, where are you, God? When will you rescue me? When will you deliver me? And what he spoke to my heart was mobilize my people, the body of Christ, to be the answer to those cries. And that was the birth of Out of Darkness.
Yeah. So how do you go from having that vision and having that, God revealing kind of, this is where I'm guiding you, to going from being a lawyer and a successful lawyer, I think you mentioned that you were about to become partner, to then launching this ministry?
Yeah. And those details definitely matter, because it doesn't just magically come to fruition, right? So the first thing I remember praying, like, I don't think any of us are supposed to do these God dreams alone. I don't think our egos can handle it. I don't think we're capable of it. And I remember saying, okay, God, who are you inviting to be a part of this? And I would be sitting in meetings with people. I remember sitting with a client, and we, us lawyers, we run our time clocks and 6-minute increments. And I remember getting to the end of that meeting, and I stopped the clock, and I really felt the Lord saying, tell her the vision. And so I said, do you have a few extra minutes off the clock? And she said, yeah. And I shared this vision, and the Lord had prepared her for it. She said, I'm in. Whatever I can do, I'm in. And then a couple more of those same conversations, we had our first board of directors. And then God started highlighting people to form a prayer team. They were all prepared. They all said yes. And so these teams started to come together, started meeting with other ministries that were already doing work in the trafficking area, and asking them, hey, this is the vision God gave me. Is there a need for it? Is someone already doing it? If so, let me go partner with what they're doing. And over, it's needed. Nobody's doing it. Here's some things that might help you. Here's another introduction that might help. And so there was about 6 months of planning and building before we were ready to launch. And then really, even since then, it's been a constant process of revisiting, revising, growing, adapting, learning, never saying, okay, we got it. We've got this thing figured out. We've arrived, but just staying in that journey of humility with the Lord and the people he continues to bring to the team to make it better.
And what did that transition look? 'Cause at some point you went from being full-time lawyer to full-time all in, with Out of Darkness. And there was a little bit of a crossover, right? All that.
So I thought when the Lord gave this vision, like, I'm going to get to do this full time right away. That was not the case. It took 2.5 years before the Lord released me. And in that time, I didn't have a family. So I worked my day job, and then nights and weekends, I couldn't wait to dig back in to building out of darkness, and always asking the Lord, am I free to go yet? Am I free? And he's like, no. And in that time period, I had gotten myself into some bad financial situations. That was all part of the lifestyle that I had built for myself. And so the Lord was bringing wisdom and financial freedom into these areas of my life that still were established from my time in the world. And then also there was this big thing that he emphasized of this: your time at your firm is not a means to an end. There is kingdom purpose right now. And so he really convicted me that every client that came in was someone in need of a touch from God right then. And so how do I embrace the kingdom purpose where I am now in preparation also for where he's taking me?
Yeah, I feel like God's always up to something.
Yes.
He's always preparing us for something that's ahead of us. We may not know what it is, but he does. And so he's got to be faithful with where we're at in the moment, and then he'll reveal it at the right time.
So good.
So what happened when you went to your bosses and said, hey, I'm ready to branch out here?
Yep. So after a little over 2 years, and they were incredible because they saw what God was doing, and they started, there would be meetings in work hours, and I would ask permission. They'd say, yeah, go ahead and go. And when it got to the point, I knew they were both preparing for retirement, and they wanted me to continue the firm after them. And I definitely felt a strong sense of this is going to be disappointing. And when I had the conversation with them, I told them, I feel like God's calling me to go full time without a darkness. I will never forget. They looked at me and said, we're sad to see you go. We're sad that our plans are going a different direction. But more than anything, we want you in the center of God's will for your life. And since then, a lot of my favorite staff have come to me over the years and said, God's calling me here, God's calling me there. And I've embraced those words and tried to say the same thing. More than anything, I want to see you in the center of God's will for your life. So by December of 2013, I was out of the firm and full-time doing ministry.
So what was that? How has that been? I mean, you're going from worldly success, from what the world says. You had the money, you got all that, and then you go into ministry. So what was that? Was that a hard transition, or was it like God met you in the middle of that somewhere and said, hey, this is way more worthwhile than what you're doing over here? I mean, what did that look like?
I think to everyone looking in, this must be so hard, right? This looks so sacrificial. From the inside, when like, this is the passion of my heart and this is where God's leading, you can't get there fast enough. Like it was not hard. And not because there was something special about me. The Lord had just filled me with so much excitement about where we were going next. We talk about counting the cost as believers. We have to understand for sure, but it doesn't even feel like a cost when you get to that moment. And then to see over the past 10 years, the way God has shown up miraculously. I mean, the car that I had bought as an attorney, I had a convertible Audi TT, and I'm driving that around in my first years of ministry, and it's breaking down, and I don't have, like, every month it would need a significant repair. I didn't have the money to fix it. And I remember the Lord saying, I'm going to take care of your car, but I don't want you to communicate your need, because I don't want you to see people respond to you communicating your need. I want to show you what I can do. And I went to have pizza with a friend one night, and I puttered out and stalled into their driveway. And I went in, we're having a great time catching up, and we always prayed for each other at the end of our time together. And they said, Jeff, what do you need? And I said, well, the ministry, I started talking. They're like, great, we support the ministry, but what do you need? And I got a little choked up, and I was like, well, I'm struggling with my car right now. The Lord told me to be patient and have faith. They wrote me a check for a new car. And they, not only that, they said 3 months ago, the Lord told us that when we sold our car, to put aside that money because he was going to bring someone to us that needed a car. And we thought we misheard him, and we had lost faith that we had heard the Lord's voice. And they're crying, the Lord was so kind to us to give us this specific opportunity. And I'm crying, like, I can't believe God's using you and your generosity. And I could tell 20 testimonies like that of what feels like counting the cost, I'm walking away from a paycheck that's certain, but the Lord's provision is so much more certain.
So I know you've shared this before at Rising, but there was kind of this crossover, this cross section between your past life and this new life. So what did that look like when you kind of, how did you get released from the past, I guess, in that sense?
Yep. So again, start walking with the Lord in January 2009, start bringing this struggle with addiction and pornography out into the light, saying, okay, I'm not okay with this anymore. I don't accept it. But I had not overcome it. And I remember, fast forwarding to that spring 2011, where the Lord gives the calling for Out of Darkness and what it's going to look like. And a couple months later, I struggle and fall into pornography again. And I'm laying in bed, I'm journaling, I'm talking to the Lord, but like very ashamedly. And there was this moment, and it was very gracious. It was not a punch from the Lord, but he knew that I was seeing pornography as just kind of fantasy. Like, it's not real people. No one's getting hurt. And he knew that with what he was calling me to, hey, I'm calling you to help liberate people into freedom, and you're perpetuating their bondage. Just putting it really bluntly, when I consume pornography, I'm creating the demand that keeps sexual bondage going. And he didn't punch me over the head with it, but he gave me this picture of us getting our first call on our hotline, and me driving with a woman volunteer on our team to pick a lady up, and she gets in the car, and it's someone I had been looking at on my screen. And all of that integrated. And he's like, it's not separate, it's not fake, it's real people in real distress whose lives are being broken, who the enemy is looking to steal, kill, and destroy. I gave you this calling in spite of your struggle, but it's time to be free of that. And then for 2 years, I didn't even feel a temptation. The Lord renewed my mind, renewed my desires. 2 years to the day from when I was writing in my journal, the temptation came back again. And I remember thinking, oh no, like, am I not really free? Was I just white knuckling? And the Lord said, no, Jeff, freedom is the power to say no. Mm-hmm. You didn't have the power to say no in your bondage. I've given you the power to say no, but I've taught you for 2 years how to exercise it. I've taught you spiritual warfare. I've taught you how to take your thoughts captive. So now, like, walking with me in righteousness is making the daily decision. Not that you get to be free of temptation, but you're empowered to daily decide.
So I feel like we were talking earlier about this idea that God doesn't waste anything. You know what I mean? So it's like God redeems our path. He even redeems our failures, but he also redeems kind of our background. So it's like you being a lawyer, you kind of having that background. It's like God's redeeming all that. He's still using it to accomplish his greater purpose through you. And so I just think it's a beautiful thing that God just does what he does. You know what I mean? It takes us, even though we're faulty, even though we're not perfect, even though we have our issues, that he says, hey, he invites us into it before we're even free of all that. Does that make any sense?
It does and it doesn't, right? I mean, I've had people over the years say or question, like, should you be doing what you do, right? In light of your past. And the Lord took me to the story of Paul and how when he was Saul, he persecuted the church and he tried to stop the gospel from spreading. And then he said, okay, I'm going to call you to build up my church and spread the gospel. And when he sent the guy to go heal Paul of his blindness, and the guy says to God, don't you know who that is, Lord? And he's like, yeah, I do. And that's who I've chosen. And so many times the Lord's brought that back to me, but I have a past of sexual brokenness and exploiting women through pornography. And the Lord said, yeah, and I've delivered you from that. And you're going to call men to freedom from pornography, and you're going to call women to liberation and a new identity in me, because I've chosen you. You didn't earn it. You don't deserve it because of your past, but I take the foolish things of the world, and that's wisdom. So yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible.
Well, I just want to thank you. I mean, thank you for your hard work and your labor. It's been an honor and privilege to get to watch you kind of grow this ministry and develop this ministry, and you develop as a leader of this ministry. I know that, there are sacrifices we make in ministry, and it's hard, right? There are moments, I'm sure, when you are dealing with real darkness and real pain and just confusion, and that you keep going, that you've been doing this now for years. So thank you for the hard work that you're doing. On behalf of Rising, I just want to thank you for all that, and want you to know that we're behind you. So I don't know if we kind of wrap up, like, you get up here on a Sunday and everybody sees you, but how can we, kind of like your friends, like, I mean, we're not be, here's a new car, but like, how can we be supporting you and praying for you so that you don't feel like you're alone in the battle?
That's such a good question. And before I share that, I just want to say the thanks for the journey. When I think about in the time I've known y'all and in the time Rising Church has supported us, I've gotten married, I've had 3 kids, we've gone through a ministry transition, we've seen almost 2,000 women make the choice to step out of what they're in to try something new. So thank you all for that. And I would say that longevity we don't take for granted, because a lot of places, they support for a season and then they look for the next new and exciting thing, and y'all have been with us for over time consistently. I would say, in terms of prayer, we feel like we're called to a season of expanding in the nation and going to places where women don't have an option yet. So I tend to rush into things. So you guys can pray that we would have wisdom, God's timing on it, that we would know where to go and when, and that he would be preparing those locations ahead of us so that those volunteers, those church partners, those financial supporters will be ready and waiting when this comes to mobilize. Because again, the original call is the body of Christ responding to the need for rescue in the sex industry. So that we would love your prayers in that.
All right. Well, we're going to commit to that, right, Rising? And we're behind you, and thank you, and want to support you in any way we can. So,
Pastor,
you guys have a great rest of your discussion, and we will check back in with you next week.
Bye, y'all.